with reason, measure with science, act with ethics, reduce the pain, increase the joy, humanity remains.
Skunk Works and the engineering of stealth survival. Imagine standing in the middle of 1943, right in the thick of World War II, as the U.S. military knocks on your door in absolute panic. They demand a brand new jet fighter to counter German jets that are dominating the skies. And your deadline is not 10 years, not 5, but an absurdly brief 130 days. Most modern corporations need 6 months just to schedule a meeting to discuss the agenda for their next meeting. Yet a tiny team working out of a rented circus tent that reeked of burning plastics and industrial fertilizer managed to deliver a functional jet 6 days ahead of schedule. Welcome to the world of Skunk Works, the Advanced Development Programs division of Lockheed Martin. This was not merely a workshop for riveting aluminum and titanium. It was perhaps humanity's most aggressive laboratory for re-engineering human decision-making under existential pressure. The fundamental problem with how we analyze historical success and failure is our tendency to fall into emotional biases. We attribute triumph to mystical genius or permanent good luck, and we explain away defeat with conspiracies or bad timing. But the cold, rational reality is that success is the direct outcome of engineered decisions formulated within a specific context, grounded in rigorous data collection, cleansed of logical fallacies, and executed to minimize systemic pain and secure survival. In this essay, we are not here to tell romanticized war stories about spy planes. We are here to dissect, through strict cause and effect, how Lockheed's Skunk Works systematically dismantled defense bureaucracy, exposed the logical fallacies that paralyze large institutions, and constructed a frictionless innovation engine driven by pure scientific rationality. Chapter 1. The Historical Genesis of June 1943. To decode the genetic blueprint of Skunk Works, we must return to the precise historical context and physical conditions of its birth. On June 21, 1943, the United States Air Forces issued a formal classified contract to Lockheed to build a jet fighter capable of countering Germany's formidable Messerschmitt Me-262. The challenge was both technologically unprecedented and existentially urgent. Legendary aeronautical engineer Clarence Kelly Johnson established a hyper-focused secret division within Lockheed, choosing a makeshift facility adjacent to a plastics factory and a foul-smelling chemical plant in Burbank, California. The stench was so pungent that employees began calling the facility Skunk Works, a nod to a foul-smelling factory in a popular comic strip of that era. But behind that unpleasant odor lay the construction of the most uncompromising organizational model in industrial history. Johnson and his team delivered the XP-80 Shooting Star prototype in just 143 days, shattering expectations and signaling a new paradigm where decisions were no longer driven by wishful thinking but by empirical measurement. The XP-80 was merely the proof of concept. By the mid-1950s, specifically in 1955, Skunk Works developed the U-2 high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft, which flew at unprecedented altitudes to gather critical intelligence for the United States during the tense heights of the Cold War. When Soviet surface-to-air missiles shot down a U-2 on May 1, 1960, the Skunk Works team did not waste time mourning or complaining about bad luck. They collected new data. Extreme altitude was no longer an absolute shield. Therefore, the new operational variable to manipulate was a combination of extreme speed and radar cross-section reduction. This cold realization led directly to the birth of the legendary SR-31 Blackbird, which took its maiden flight on December 22, 1964. The SR-31 was an engineering miracle that flew at speeds exceeding Mach 3.2 at altitudes above 80,000 feet. It flew so fast that kinetic air friction threatened to melt its frame, forcing Skunk Works to invent new high-temperature titanium alloys and secretly purchase raw titanium from the Soviet Union itself through disguised front companies. Decades later, on December 1, 1977, under the leadership of Johnson's successor, Ben Rich, the team flew the Have Blue prototype, which evolved into the F-117 Nighthawk in 1981, the world's first operational stealth attack aircraft. This timeline is not just a list of triumphs, it is a continuous chain of actions rooted in describing reality, critiquing flaws, and executing precise interventions to ensure national survival. Chapter 2: Deconstructing Kelly Johnson's Rules for Institutional Survival. An analytical dissection of Skunk Works requires us to systematically examine the famous 14 rules of management established by Kelly Johnson. These were not generic corporate platitudes. They represented a rigid algorithm designed to streamline information flow and eradicate operational waste. Johnson's first rule was uncompromising. The Skunk Works manager must be delegated practically complete control of his program and must report directly to a high-level corporate officer or military authority, with no intermediate bureaucrats. When we analyze this rule from a systemic standpoint, it functions as a total purge of bureaucratic layers that typically corrupt data. Traditional organizations gather data from the field and pass it through dozens of managerial filters. At every level, data gets sanitized or distorted to protect fragile egos or dodge accountability. At Skunk Works, that chain was collapsed into a single vector. Scientific clarity requires raw observation. Thus, Johnson mandated direct communication lines to decision-makers who actually possessed the authority to act. Johnson's second rule demanded a drastic restriction on team size. He recognized that adding more engineers to a complex problem does not linearly increase productivity. It increases communication overhead, friction, and diffusion of responsibility. A small team of elite specialists will consistently outperform an army of uncoordinated personnel. This rule directly aligns with rigorous data gathering. In a compact team, feedback loops are instantaneous, critical flaws are immediately exposed, and no one can hide behind committee ambiguity. Furthermore, Johnson insisted on radical paperwork reduction. He banned massive, bloated reports that nobody reads, replacing them with concise, data-driven documentation. In conventional corporate culture, excessive paperwork is a defensive tactic used by employees to duck personal responsibility. By enforcing brevity and clarity, documentation at Skunk Works reverted to its true scientific purpose, a precise instrument for measurement and critique. When measured against the imperative of minimizing pain and maximizing survival, Johnson's rules eliminated the chronic agony that plagues defense procurement: catastrophic delay, exponential budget overruns, and technological obsolescence. He engineered an organizational ecosystem stripped of ego, forcing every team member to operate as a rational agent focused on one singular goal: producing an aircraft that works, survives, and dominates in a hostile environment. Chapter 3: Logical Fallacies and the Destruction of Defense Bureaucracy. The historic success of Lockheed's Skunk Works cannot be fully grasped without analyzing its relentless battle against the logical fallacies that routinely cripple large defense contractors and military bureaucracies. The first cognitive trap Skunk Works systematically demolished was the fallacy known as argumentum ad antiquitatem, or the appeal to tradition. Traditional defense acquisition assumed that the only legitimate way to build an aircraft was to adhere strictly to decades-old bureaucratic protocols, endless oversight committees, thousands of pages of rigid specifications, and years of component testing before system integration. When Kelly Johnson proposed delivering the XP-80 in 143 days, military traditionalists dismissed his timeline as impossible, arguing that things have never been done that way. Johnson's rational counter was simple. The present context of WW2 demanded an immediate response, and clinging to legacy methods simply because they were traditional was an irrational path to defeat. The second fallacy Skunkworks dismantled was argumentum ad verecundium, or the appeal to authority. In the late 1970s, when Ben Rich was pushing the boundaries of stealth technology for the F-117 Nighthawk, top Pentagon experts and senior aerodynamicists openly ridiculed the idea that a jagged, flat-faceted aircraft could hide from advanced radar. These authorities possessed immense academic prestige and insisted that only smooth, traditional aerodynamic shapes could fly efficiently. But Ben Rich and his engineers refused to defer to credentials. They anchored their work in the raw physics equations of Soviet scientist Pyotr Ufimtsev regarding electromagnetic wave scattering. They built the hopeless diamond model and tested it in radar ranges. The empirical data was indisputable. The physics worked, the radar return virtually disappeared, and the authority of the skeptics evaporated in the face of scientific proof. A third, highly destructive trap in industrial design is the sunk cost fallacy. Conventional corporations, after pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into a flawed concept, routinely double down and throw good money after bad, simply because they cannot bear to admit the initial investment was wasted. Skunkworks operated on the exact opposite logic. If empirical data proved an engineering pathway was dead, it was abandoned immediately without emotional remorse. During the development of the SR-71 Blackbird, the team encountered extreme thermal expansion challenges where the airframe leaked fuel continuously on the tarmac before heating up in flight. Rather than falling into the trap of patching a broken legacy design, they threw out standard practices, invented an entirely new synthetic fuel formula, developed specialized sealants, and utilized titanium alloys that adapted to extreme heat friction. They recognized that past expenditure is irrelevant. Current decisions must be evaluated strictly on whether they minimize future pain and achieve mission survival. Finally, Skunkworks rejected argumentum ad populum, or the bandwagon fallacy. The prevailing consensus in military procurement held that a project's importance and quality were proportional to the sheer number of subcontractors and engineers assigned to it. Skunkworks proved that massive consensus-driven groups breed groupthink and intellectual compromise. By keeping their teams intentionally small and housing engineers, technicians, and fabricators under one roof, they created an environment where ideas were subjected to immediate peer critique. Through this systematic elimination of logical fallacies, Skunkworks established a sterile intellectual space where only empirical facts, mathematical truths, and physical realities were allowed to dictate design decisions. Chapter 4. The Pain Reduction Equation and Reshaping Reality. When we examine Skunkworks through an ethical and systemic framework, its underlying operational engine reveals itself, a relentless commitment to pain reduction and institutional survival. One might ask how a defense contractor that engineers high-performance warplanes aligns with the concept of pain reduction. The answer lies in analyzing context and system dynamics. During the Cold War, the ultimate existential threat was a nuclear exchange triggered by miscalculation or lack of intelligence. In that high-stakes context, accurate data was the ultimate tool for pain mitigation. Reconnaissance platforms like the U-2 and the SR-71 were not offensive weapons of mass destruction. They were scientific instruments designed to gather undeniable physical evidence. By photographing military positions and verifying force deployments, these aircraft provided political leaders with empirical facts, preventing panic-driven decisions and mitigating the ultimate pain of global conflict. At the organizational level, Skunkworks applied this exact same logic to protect its workforce. Traditional corporate environments inflict immense psychological and creative pain on talented engineers through endless micromanagement, office politics, and bureaucracy delay. Johnson insulated his teams from external political noise, incentivized high performance, and granted absolute autonomy to competent individuals. By altering the environmental variables, he reduced professional frustration and unlocked human potential. The algorithmic loop driving Skunkworks can be broken down into 3 logical steps. 1. Contextual data collection. Assess the threat landscape accurately. Radar systems are improving, threat reaction times are shrinking, and legacy aircraft are becoming vulnerable.
2. Scientific variable manipulation. Reject conventional design norms. Manipulate radar reflectivity equations, pioneer radar-absorbent materials, and redesign airframes using faceted or blended geometry. And the survival and pain reduction filter. Does this design choice preserve the pilot and the asset? Yes, because stealth nullifies surface-to-air missile threats. Does it minimize systemic pain? Yes, by achieving air superiority without incurring catastrophic losses in combat. When problems are addressed through this cold analytical lens, free from bureaucratic vanity or corporate dogma, every aircraft rolling out of the Skunk Works hangar becomes a physical manifestation of logical consistency. Success is never an accident of luck, and failure is never a curse of fate. Success occurs when engineering calculations align perfectly with the laws of physics. Failure occurs when a real-world variable is ignored. And whenever an error inevitably occurred, the team immediately returned to the diagnostic phase. Describe the flaw, critique the data, alter the variable, and retest. This uncompromising commitment to reality is why Skunk Works remains the gold standard for high-stakes innovation.
Conclusion: the deep philosophy of ultimate systemic efficiency. Ultimately, the story of Lockheed's Skunk Works is far more than a chapter in aviation history or a tribute to legendary leaders like Kelly Johnson and Ben Rich. It stands as a timeless philosophical case study in what human organizations can achieve when they strip away institutional illusions, reject logical fallacies, and adopt empirical science as their sole navigational compass. Skunk Works proved that the most complex challenges are not solved by throwing more bodies at a problem, generating endless bureaucratic paperwork, or hiding behind corporate buzzwords. They are solved by returning to first principles, gathering data with ruthless honesty, and taking decisive action aimed at ensuring survival and eliminating waste. Organizations fail not because they lack talent or resources, but because they surrender to cognitive fallacies and foolishly expect different results from the same broken processes. Skunk Works shattered those fallacies at the doorstep of a smelly circus tent in Burbank, leaving behind an enduring truth. Success is the logical outcome for those who dare to simplify the complex, face reality without delusion, and align every decision with cold, unyielding rationality. What did you gain from the video?